I've been driving 18-wheelers for 22 years. I've seen brake failures on black ice. I've watched a guy's rig flip sideways in a dust storm outside Elko like it weighed nothing. I've pulled over twice in my life because my hands were shaking too bad to hold the wheel. But nothing, not one single thing in 2 decades on American roads, has ever messed with my head the way that night on I-80 did. And I'm not a man who spooks easy. His name was Dale. Just Dale. That's all you're getting because his family asked me not to, and that's the one thing I still have the decency to respect. We'd been running together for about 4 years by that point. Not officially partners, we both ran independent, different companies, different loads, but we had a rhythm. Whenever our routes overlapped, we'd convoy. You do that out there. The safer, it's less lonely. And if something goes wrong at 3 a.m. on a stretch where your cell signal died 40 miles back, you want another set of headlights behind you. Dale and I had the same route that week. Reno to Salt Lake. Standard I-80 run through Nevada. We'd done it probably 30 times together. We pulled out of the Flying J on Nugget Avenue in Sparks around 10:45 p.m. Late start, but Dale wanted to time it so we'd clear the mountain elevation before the temperature dropped too hard. Smart driver. He always thought like that. His rig was running good, a red Kenworth T680, loaded with construction equipment parts, nothing unusual. I was hauling auto parts in a white Peterbilt. We got on I-80 East, settled in at about 65, and started talking on Channel 19 the way we always did. Now here's the thing about I-80 through Central Nevada. Most people don't know this stretch. They think Nevada is Vegas. It's not. Between Winnemucca and Battle Mountain, there is nothing. I mean, genuinely, structurally nothing. You've got about 80 miles of highway where the land is so flat and so dark that your headlights feel like the only light source in the world. No towns. No overpasses. No billboards after a certain point. Just sage, darkness, and the white dashes on the road disappearing under your tires. It's not scary exactly. It's more like the highway stops being part of civilization and starts being something else entirely. Truckers who run it regularly will tell you the same thing. That stretch has a feel. We were somewhere around mile marker 210 when Dale said something I didn't think anything of at the time. He said, "You ever get the feeling the road's longer than it used to be?" I laughed. I said something like, "Yeah, every time I drive it." He laughed too. Normal road talk. That was maybe 11:50 p.m. Then nothing. Not dramatic nothing. Not static or a cut-off mid-sentence. Just the channel going quiet the way it does when someone stops talking. I gave it a few minutes. Figured he'd switched frequencies or maybe his handset slipped. I clicked over and said his name a couple times. No answer. I wasn't worried yet. You don't panic on a radio silence. There are 100 reasons a guy goes quiet. But I checked my mirrors, and his headlights were gone. That's when the first real wrong feeling hit me. Because on that stretch of I-80, in that darkness, you can see headlights for 4 miles behind you. There's nothing to block them. 1 second his lights were there. I'd been glancing at them the whole drive. It's just what you do in a convoy, and then they weren't. No fav. No gradual disappearance like he took an exit. Just gone. I pulled back on the throttle, slowed down, kept trying the radio. Nothing. I turned around at the next crossover, which took me almost 6 miles to find, and drove back west. Pulled over on the right shoulder, completely straight, completely level. No blown tires. No damage. Not in a ditch. Parked like he'd just decided to stop. Hazard lights were off. Engine was off. The cab was dark. I pulled in behind him and sat there for probably 10 seconds before I got out. I don't know why I hesitated. Something about the way it looked. Too neat, too deliberate. Made me not want to walk up to that door. But I did. I knocked. Nothing. I tried the handle. Unlocked. I opened the passenger side door and the dome light came on and I just stood on the step and looked. His logbook was open on the passenger seat. He'd been filling in the entry for that night. The pen was still uncapped, sitting in the crease of the spine. His thermos was in the cup holder. I reached over and touched it. Still warm. His phone was on the dash mount. His jacket was folded on the sleeper berth, the way he always folded it, left sleeve over right sleeve. His boots were on the floor of the cab. Both of them. No dale. I'm gonna say that again because I need you to understand what I mean. His boots were in the cab. Whatever he walked out into that Nevada night in, it wasn't shoes. It wasn't boots. I don't know what it was. I called 911 from the shoulder. Elko County Sheriff's Department got there in about 40 minutes. They were professional, thorough, asked me the same questions 4 or 5 times in different ways, which I understood. They searched the roadside with flashlights. They called in additional units. A highway patrol officer from the Battle Mountain Post drove out. By 3 a.m. there were 6 vehicles on that shoulder, and not one person had found a single footprint, a single sign of where he'd gone, a single reason for any of it. His cargo was intact. His wallet was in the center console, $43 in cash and his pilot loyalty card. His phone was locked, but they were able to pull the last outgoing activity, the radio transmission to me at 11:50 p.m. After that, nothing. No calls made, no calls received, no movement on the device at all. The investigators found one thing they couldn't explain and told me about only because I kept pushing. The driver's seat was adjusted forward, all the way forward. Dale was a big guy, broad shoulders, 6'1". He drove with the seat back almost as far as it would go, the way tall guys do. When they found the truck, the seat was pushed up so close to the steering wheel that a man his size couldn't have fit behind it. They checked the adjustment rail. It wasn't broken. Someone had moved it, either before he got out or after. I've thought about that seat for 6 years. I've run I-80 probably 60 more times since that night. I try not to stop on that stretch after dark, which I know sounds irrational for a man who does this for a living. But I always look at mile marker 216 when I pass it. I don't know what I'm looking for. I think part of me expects to see something, some explanation, just sitting there on the shoulder waiting for me to drive by slow enough to read it. There's never anything. Just road. Just dark. Just the flat Nevada emptiness that doesn't give a single thing back. Dale's truck sat in an Elko impound yard for 14 months before his company had it released. I heard through the network that they sold it. I heard from someone else that the buyer had the cab completely refitted. I don't know if that's true. I hope it is. His family, I've stayed in touch with them in the limited, awkward way you stay in touch with people you share a tragedy with. They've never gotten an answer. There were search efforts. There were tips that went nowhere. There was a period where investigators thought he might have walked into the desert deliberately, some kind of mental health episode, except that Dale was the most grounded, steadiest person I knew. Had been for 4 years. No history of anything. No warning signs. His wife told me she'd spoken to him 2 hours before we left Sparks. He'd been talking about the breakfast he was going to make on Sunday. Bacon and eggs and sourdough toast. I don't have a theory. I want to be honest with you about that because a lot of people who tell stories like this have a theory, and they want you to believe it, and I think that's mostly just people not being able to tolerate the open end of a thing. I've tried on every explanation. Medical event, foul play, disorientation, something in the water or air out there that I don't understand. None of them account for the boots. None of them account for the seat. None of them account for the fact that 6 sheriff's deputies with flashlights searched that roadside and found nothing but sage and gravel and the sound of a highway that just keeps going. The road doesn't care. That's the thing they don't tell you when you get into this work. You think of the highway as a place you move through, a corridor, something you control with your hands and your gears and your schedule. But out there in that Nevada dark, on a stretch where there's nothing for 80 miles in every direction and the sky is so big it stops feeling like sky, you start to understand that you're not in control of anything. You're just a set of headlights. You're just noise on an otherwise quiet frequency. And sometimes the frequency just goes silent. I still drive. I still run the I-80. I still talk on Channel 19 in the dark. But I don't laugh when someone says the road feels longer than it used to be. I still sleep on my side of the bed. 3 years later, and I still don't cross the middle. I don't know what that says about me. Probably nothing good. But you hold on to the things that make the world feel like it still has a shape, even when you know it doesn't. His name was Ray. That's all I'll give you. He'd been driving long haul for 11 years when he disappeared. Before that, he did local freight, regional stuff, home every night. But we needed the money after our youngest was born and the long haul pay was better, so he made the switch and we adjusted. the way you adjust to everything when you're trying to keep a family moving forward. You learn to love someone in the gaps they leave. The calls from truck stops, the texts at red lights he wasn't supposed to send. The way the house smelled different the first day he came home, like road and diesel and something that was still him underneath all of it. We had a good life. I want to say that first before I say anything else. We had a genuinely good life. He left on a Tuesday in October. The load was going from San Antonio down to Laredo, standard US 83 run through South Texas, a route he'd done easily 15-20 times. He knew that road. He liked that road, actually. Said it was flat and honest, nothing tricky about it. He checked in with me around 6 p.m. from a Shell station just outside Cutula. Said he was making good time. Said he'd call when he got to the pilot in Laredo. I told him to eat something real, not just gas station food. He said he already had a sandwich. I didn't believe him. That was the last real conversation we had. He never called from Laredo. I didn't panic until midnight. With truckers, you learn to hold off on the panic because there are 100 reasons for a delayed check-in, and most of them are boring. Traffic. Way station backup. He fell asleep at a rest stop. I called his cell at 12:15 and it went straight to voicemail. I called again at 1 a.m. Same thing. By 2 a.m. I was sitting at the kitchen table with every light in the house on, and I already knew. You know before you know. Any wife will tell you that. Your body figures it out before your brain will let you. I called his company's dispatch line at 2:30 a.m. They pulled his GPS data. His last recorded ping was on US 83 near the King Ranch stretch, between Falfurrias and Encino, at 7:44 p.m. After that, nothing. The signal just stopped. Not lost signal, the device went offline. Someone turned it off, or it was destroyed, or something happened that I don't have a technical word for. They told me not to worry yet, that devices malfunction. I remember thinking, you didn't just lose your husband's signal at 7:44 p.m. in the middle of South Texas. So do not tell me not to worry yet. Willacy County Sheriff's deputies started searching the next morning. Then it spread to Brooks County and Jim Hogg County. They were looking for the truck, looking for him, looking for anything on that stretch of 83 that might explain a vanished driver. There's a particular kind of emptiness to that part of Texas that I think people underestimate if they've never been there. The King Ranch alone is bigger than the state of Rhode Island. There are sections of US 83 down there where you can drive 40 minutes without seeing another vehicle. The land is flat and scrubby, and the sky does this thing at dusk where it goes completely orange and purple and beautiful, and Ray had mentioned that to me once, that the sunsets on that stretch were something else. I think about that now. Whether he saw the sunset that Tuesday, they found nothing for 3 days. And then my phone rang. I want to be careful about how I describe this because I've told this story to sheriff's investigators and to a private investigator my sister hired and to a grief counselor, and every single time I tell it I can see on people's faces the moment they decide I imagined it. So I'm going to tell you exactly what happened, and I'm going to ask you to just let it be what it was. It was Thursday evening, 3 days after he vanished. I was in the kitchen, the kids were in the living room. It was that weird hollow hour after dinner when the house is technically functioning but nothing feels real. My phone rang. Unknown number. Texas area code 956, which is the Rio Grande Valley region. I answered because I'd been answering every unknown number for 3 days hoping it was news. There was a pause, maybe 2 seconds. Then I heard Ray's voice. He said 2 words. He said, "I'm sorry." Not frantic, not loud, calm. The way he said it when he'd forgotten an anniversary or come home later than he promised. That specific, quiet, personal sorry that was only his. And then the line went dead. I called back immediately. Disconnected number. I called again. Same. I called the sheriff's department within 5 minutes. They traced it. A prepaid cell, purchased with cash at a Stripes convenience store in Rio Grande City 11 days before Ray even went missing. The phone was never located. It was never used again before or after that call. The call lasted 9 seconds. 9 seconds. I have gone over those 9 seconds more times than I can count. I have asked myself every version of every question. Was it a recording? Was someone using his voice to torment me? Was it actually him, alive, somewhere, unable to say more? Was it something I don't have a category for? The investigator told me it was likely a cruel hoax by someone who'd seen the missing persons report. I understand why he said that. I also know my husband's voice better than I know my own. I know the specific weight of how he said that word to me. It wasn't a recording. It wasn't an impression. It was him. They found the truck 6 days later. A ranch hand on a cattle property about 40 miles west of Ray's last GPS ping spotted it on a caliche road that runs along the edge of a lease pasture. Not crashed, not damaged, just sitting there, nose pointed toward a fence line, like someone had parked it and walked away. The keys were in the ignition. Ray's phone was in the cup holder, dead battery. His wallet was in the glove box. His wedding ring was on the floor of the passenger side, which is the detail that undid me completely when they told me, because Ray never took his ring off. Not once in 9 years of marriage. I used to tease him about it, said it was going to leave a permanent dent in his finger. He said that was fine by him. The investigators noted something about the truck that I wasn't told until weeks later, when my sister pushed hard enough. The seat. Ray was not a tall man, 5'8", medium build. He had the seat adjusted to a specific position, same every time. He was particular about it. When they found the truck, the seat was pushed all the way back, as far back as the rail allowed, like someone with very long legs had been sitting in it last, or like someone had moved it deliberately and didn't know or didn't care that it would be noticed. Nobody has ever explained that to me. The Willacy County case is technically still open. Technically. In practice, I know what open means when there are no leads, no body, no evidence trail, no anything. It means a file in a cabinet that nobody pulls unless someone makes them. I'm not bitter about that in the way you might expect. The deputies who worked it were decent men who ran out of road to follow. You can't be angry at someone for reaching the end of what's findable. What I am, 3 years later, is changed in a way I didn't know a person could be changed. Because grief, regular grief, has a shape. People talk about stages, and I used to think that was a cliche, but there is something to it. There's a forward movement to grief even when it doesn't feel like it. But this isn't grief exactly. This is something that doesn't have a name yet. Because Ray might be dead, or Ray might not be, and you cannot grieve and hope at the same time without it tearing something in you that doesn't grow back clean. I kept his number in my phone. I haven't called it. His company recovered the line long ago. It's been reassigned. But I keep his contact there with his name and the picture I had of him from the summer before, standing in the driveway squinting into the sun with a Whataburger cup in his hand, looking slightly annoyed that I was taking his picture. That's the man I'm waiting for information about. That's the man who called me from a number I didn't recognize and said 2 words and then went silent in a way that the whole state of Texas has never been able to explain. US 83 still runs. Trucks still move through that King Ranch stretch every night. I know that because I've driven it. Twice by myself, looking out the window at the flat scrub land and the dark and the nothing, trying to understand what that road took from me and why and where it put him. It didn't tell me anything. Roads don't. That's what I've learned. They carry you and they keep moving and they don't owe you a single explanation. They were here before us and they'll be here after, and whatever happened on that Tuesday evening in October between Falfurrias and Encino, that road has already moved 1 million more tires over the exact same asphalt, and it will move 1 million more, and it doesn't remember Ray any more than it remembers anyone. But I do. Every single day. I do. 31 years I worked for the Arizona Department of Transportation. Weigh stations, ports of entry, compliance inspections. I processed somewhere in the neighborhood of 400,000 commercial vehicles in that career. I know that sounds like a made-up number. It isn't. You run a busy station on I-10 long enough, that's just what the math produces. For 100,000 trucks. Weights, axle loads, permits, logbooks, hazmat placards. I could do it in my sleep, and some nights on the graveyard shift I practically did. I retired in 2019. I sleep fine most nights, except when I think about the flatbed that came through Ehrenberg at 2:14 in the morning and never came out the other side. Let me give you the facts first, because that's how I'm built. Facts first, then whatever's left over. The Ehrenberg Way station sits on I-10 eastbound right at the California-Arizona border, just after you cross the Colorado River. If you're a commercial driver coming in from the California side heading toward Phoenix, you don't get to skip it. You pull in, you get weighed, you get inspected. If the system flags you, you get cleared, you pull back out onto the highway. It's a routine that happens hundreds of times every 24 hours. The facility has fixed scales, a weigh-in-motion pad on the approach, CCTV covering the entire property, and a logging system that timestamps every single transaction to the second. When I say we logged him in at 2:14 a.m., I mean 2 hours, 14 minutes, and 7 seconds. That's the level of precision we're working with. The driver, I'll call him Frank, because that's close enough and his family has been through enough, came through on a Tuesday night in March. Flatbed configuration, steel coil load, properly tarped and strapped. He was running eastbound, destination listed as a steel fabrication facility outside of Chandler. His paperwork was in order. His weight came in legal. I ran his CDL, checked his hours of service log, looked at the load securement. Everything clean. I cleared him at 2:21 a.m. 7 minutes total, which is about average for a clean flatbed inspection. I watched his taillights pull back onto I-10 East on the monitor, and I moved on to the next truck in the queue. That was the last confirmed sighting of Frank anywhere on the face of this earth. The next eastbound checkpoint on that corridor is the agricultural inspection station at Tonopah, about 90 miles down I-10. Frank never came through it. That's not immediately alarming. Commercial vehicles aren't required to stop at AG stations. Only passenger vehicles carrying produce get flagged in. So his absence there doesn't trigger anything. The first real flag came from his company. He was due to check in with dispatch by 5 a.m. When he didn't, they started making calls. By 7 a.m., they'd contacted the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office. By 9 a.m., the Arizona DPS had a bolo out for his rig. Nothing. 90 miles of I-10 between Ehrenberg and Buckeye, and not one camera, not one witness, not one piece of physical evidence that Frank's truck ever traveled that stretch of highway. No skid marks. No debris. No reports of a flatbed pulled over anywhere on that corridor that night. It's a well-traveled road. I-10 through that section carries significant overnight freight traffic. You'd think someone would have seen something. A truck, a driver, anything. Nobody saw anything. Now here's where I need to stop and tell you something about that 90-mile stretch, because it matters and most people don't know it. Between Ehrenberg and the outskirts of the Phoenix Metro, I-10 passes through some of the most geographically isolated terrain in the American Southwest. The Harquahala Valley, the Hassayampa Plain. There are sections of that highway where you are genuinely 30-40 minutes from the nearest town in any direction. Cell coverage is inconsistent. There are no service roads running parallel for long stretches. If something happened out there and it happened fast, you could lose a truck in the dark and not find it for a long time. But 6 months? You don't lose a 40-foot flatbed with a steel coil load for 6 months. Not in America. Not on a major interstate corridor. The weight of that trailer alone is enough that you don't just tuck it somewhere and forget about it. Except that's exactly what happened. More or less. In September, 6 months and 11 days after Frank drove out of my station, a Customs and Border Protection officer in Calexico, California ran a routine check on a salvage yard in Mexicali, just across the border. Standard cross-border salvage fraud operation, looking for stolen vehicles being stripped and sold for parts. In a back row of that yard, under a tarp, they found the cab of a Kenworth T800. The VIN plate was gone. The VIN on the door jamb had been ground down with an angle grinder. The one on the firewall, the hidden one that most people stripping a vehicle don't think to check, was intact. It was Frank's truck. The flatbed trailer was never recovered. The steel coil load was never recovered. Frank was never recovered. I want to sit with that for a second, because when you say it fast, it doesn't land right. A man drove out of my inspection station at 2:21 in the morning, and 6 months later, his truck cab turned up in a Mexicali salvage yard with the identification deliberately destroyed. That's not an accident. That's not a medical event. That's not someone who pulled over and wandered into the desert in a confused state. Somebody moved that truck. Somebody drove it or had it transported across an international border. Somebody knew enough about VIN locations to grind 3 of the 4 but missed the firewall stamp. This was planned. This was executed. And whatever happened to Frank in the 90 miles between my station and Buckeye, it was not random. Mexican federal authorities were contacted. The salvage yard owner claimed he purchased the cab from a man he couldn't identify, paid cash, no paperwork, said that was normal for the region and the business. Whether that's true or a practiced lie, I can't tell you. The investigation hit a wall at the border and mostly stayed there. Here is what I think about specifically when I can't sleep. The CCTV footage from my station that night. I've watched it more times than I should admit. Frank pulls in off the highway, goes through the process, gets cleared, pulls back out. Normal in every visible way. But in the footage, and this is something I noticed maybe the fourth or fifth time I watched it, not the first, there's a vehicle. A dark-colored pickup truck. No markings. Parked on the west side of the fuel island across from the station. Not in the inspection lane. Just parked. It was there when Frank arrived, and it's still there when he leaves. About 4 minutes after his taillights disappear east on I-10, the pickup pulls out and follows. I reported this to investigators. They enhanced the footage as much as the resolution allowed. Partial plate, possibly a Texas registration, possibly not. The image quality at that distance at 2 a.m. doesn't give you certainty. They followed up on it. I don't know how far that follow-up went. Nobody called me back about it, which, in my experience, means one of two things. Either it went nowhere, or it went somewhere that they weren't going to share with a retired DOT employee. I think about Frank's face when I cleared him. He was maybe 50, heavy-set, the kind of guy who's been driving long enough that the road is just the road to him. Not anxious. Not distracted. He made a small joke about the weight of his load. Something about how steel was the only cargo that was exactly as heavy as it looked, unlike some things he'd hauled. I laughed. He laughed. He folded his paperwork back into his log folder, the way every driver does, neat and automatic, and he walked back to his cab. I didn't watch him pull out in real time. I was already processing the next truck. That's the job. That's the whole job, 31 years of it. Process, clear, move on. You can't watch every truck all the way to the horizon. There's always another one behind it. But I watched that footage. And I watched that pickup. And I've spent more hours than I want to count thinking about what was happening in that 90-mile stretch while I was back at my station processing the 2:30 a.m. wave of California freight. Whatever it was organized. It was fast. It crossed an international border. And it left a man's family with a case number, a ground-down VIN, and no answers that anyone with authority seems willing or able to finish finding. The Ehrenberg station is still running. I drove past it last spring on my way to visit my daughter in Phoenix. It was daylight, busy, trucks lined up at the scale. Normal. Everything about it looked completely normal. I kept driving, but I watched my mirrors all the way to Buckeye. Old habit. New reason. There are things you learn about the road that nobody writes down anywhere. No manual, no training course, no safety briefing your company runs you through before your first solo haul. You learn them the way people have always learned the things that matter most. From someone older, sitting across from you at a truck stop counter at 2 a.m., talking low, not making a performance out of it. Just passing it on. The way it's always been passed on. One of those things is exit 174 on US 550 in New Mexico. You don't take it. That's the whole lesson. You don't take it at night, you don't take it in the day, you don't take it because you're running late or because your GPS says it'll save you 12 minutes or because you're curious. You pass it and you keep your eyes on the road ahead and you don't think too hard about what's back there in the dark off that ramp. Every driver who runs the 550 corridor regular knows this. It gets told to you, you file it away, and when you see that exit sign coming up you just move on. I've been running US 550 for going on 16 years. Farmington to Albuquerque and back, sometimes further south toward Socorro. It's high desert country, red rock and sage, and the kind of sky that makes you feel small in a way that's sometimes peaceful and sometimes isn't. Good road mostly. Honest road. But there are stretches through the San Juan Basin where the land gets strange in a way that's hard to put language to. Where the distance does something to your sense of time. Where you can drive 40 minutes and feel like you've gone nowhere, or drive 10 and feel like you've crossed some kind of line you can't see. Exit 174 sits in one of those stretches. I don't know the full history of why drivers started warning each other about it. By the time it got told to me, it was already old knowledge. The guy who told me said he'd heard it from someone who'd been running 550 since the 80s. What I do know is the texture of those warnings. Not one specific incident, not a news story anyone could point to, just this accumulated weight of unease. Drivers who'd taken that exit and had their rigs act strange. Instruments going haywire, engines cutting out on a clear day, that specific feeling of being watched in open country where there's nothing to watch from. Drivers who'd pulled off to look down that road and seen something they didn't want to describe. Drivers who'd taken it and come back looking different somehow. Quieter, less willing to make eye contact. I put most of it in the category of road mythology. You get enough lonely miles and enough darkness and enough CB chatter and the stories accumulate. I believed enough of it to skip the exit myself, which I acknowledge is its own kind of answer to the question of how seriously I took it. Then there was the kid I'll call Marcus. He wasn't a kid really, late 20s, maybe 30. New to long haul, new to the 550 specifically. He'd been doing regional routes out of Farmington for a few months. Just started picking up the longer corridor runs. Good driver by all accounts, sharp, conscientious about his logs. The kind of guy who calls dispatch on time and doesn't invent mechanical problems to get extra rest hours. I'd run into him twice at the Flying Star truck stop off Farmington Boulevard. Seemed solid. Seemed like someone who was going to be fine out there. I wasn't the one who told him about exit 174. I assumed someone had. That's the assumption you make. That the knowledge travels, that it gets passed down the way it's supposed to. Somebody dropped the ball. Or maybe they told him and he filed it under superstition, under the kind of old-timer talk that a younger driver thinks doesn't apply to him. I understand that too. I thought the same things at his age. He took exit 174 on a Wednesday night in November, running south toward Bernalillo, behind schedule by about 40 minutes because of a wait station delay up near Aztec. His GPS showed a county road off that exit that cut east and reconnected with an M44 further south, supposedly shaving 15 minutes off his route. On a map, it looks reasonable. On a map, it looks like a perfectly logical shortcut through federal land. He didn't show up at his delivery point the next morning. His company flagged it by noon. His GPS unit had gone dark somewhere around the exit itself. Same thing as the other stories you hear, the signal just stops, no gradual fade, no malfunction error, just offline. They contacted the Sandoval County Sheriff's Department, and by Thursday afternoon there were units out looking for him on the 550 corridor and the county roads branching off it. They found his truck on Friday morning, 2 days after he took that exit. And here is where I need you to pay attention, because this is the part that doesn't fit any explanation I've been able to build in the years since. The truck was on a dirt BLM access road about 3 miles off the exit. Not crashed, not damaged, not stuck in soft dirt or washed out in a gully. Just parked on the road, engine off, keys in the ignition. Everything about the parking job was deliberate, straight, centered on the road, like someone had taken care to leave it neatly. It was facing north. Marcus had been traveling south. That exit takes you east off the southbound highway. There is no logical path by which he could have ended up 3 miles down a BLM access road pointing north unless he had turned around at some point. Turned around and driven back toward the highway. Except the road dead ends into federal land about a quarter mile past where the truck was sitting, which means if he turned around, he'd turned around after going further in, and then stopped here on his way back out. Stopped and left the truck. In the middle of the road. Facing the direction he came from, like he was ready to keep going, and then just didn't. His personal items were gone. Not his work equipment. His logbook was there. His company phone was there. All his freight documentation was in the door pocket. But his personal bag, the one drivers keep their personal stuff in, clothes and toiletries and whatever else they carry for overnight hauls. Gone. His personal cell phone, gone. His wallet, gone. You take your wallet when you leave somewhere. You take your personal cell. That's not someone who wandered off in a dissociative state. That's someone who packed, at least partially, before they left that truck. Where they went after that, into 3 miles of BLM scrubland in the San Juan Basin in November, with no vehicle, no tracks that investigators could find in the hard-packed clay, no witness, no nothing. That is the question that has never been answered. Search and rescue worked that area for 4 days. Helicopters, ground teams, the full effort. Federal land out there is vast and rugged, and November in that basin gets cold at night, down into the 20s. They found no trace of Marcus. No footprints leading away from the truck in any direction. The ground around the truck showed his boot prints up to the driver's door. One set, consistent with him getting out. And then nothing, like the ground stopped recording. I heard all of this secondhand over the weeks after, through the network, the way you hear things out here. Every driver I talked to who ran 550 regular had the same reaction. Quiet. That specific quiet that isn't shock exactly, because shock implies surprise, and I don't think any of us were fully surprised. Troubled, yes. Confirmed in something we'd carried as folk knowledge and hoped we'd never see converted into something real. But not surprised. The exit sign for 174 is still there. I pass it every couple of weeks. They haven't changed it, haven't blocked the ramp, haven't put any kind of marker or warning on it. It just sits there like any other exit sign on any other stretch of American highway. Green reflective lettering, white numbers, the little arrow pointing down toward the ramp. Nothing about it looks wrong. Nothing about it looks like anything at all. That's the thing about the road that gets you, if you drive long enough and pay attention. The places that take things from you don't announce themselves. They don't look different from the places that don't. The cursed mile and the safe mile look identical in headlights at 70 miles an hour. The exit that swallowed Marcus and the exit that leads to a perfectly ordinary county road with a perfectly ordinary gas station at the bottom, they look exactly the same from the highway. Which is why you listen when the old-timers talk low at the counter at 2 a.m. Which is why you take the knowledge when it's offered and you put it somewhere you won't lose it. Which is why, when someone who's been running a road for 20 years tells you to skip an exit, you skip the exit. You don't ask why. You don't decide the math looks good on your GPS. You don't think it doesn't apply to you. You just keep driving. Marcus's case is open with the Sandoval County Sheriff's Department. I checked last year. Still open. That's the word they use, open. As if something is waiting to walk back through the door and finish the story. I don't think anything is walking back through that door. But I pass that exit sign every 2 weeks, and every 2 weeks I keep my eyes on the road ahead, and I run the numbers on what it would cost me to be wrong. The answer is always the same. Keep driving. Just keep driving. I am not a person who believes in things she can't explain. I want to put that on the table right up front because everything I'm about to tell you is going to sound like the kind of story that gets passed around by people who believe in things they can't explain, and I need you to understand that I am not that person. I have a logistics degree from Western Kentucky University. I ran dispatch for a refrigerated freight carrier for 9 years. I managed 18 drivers across a 4-state corridor. I coordinated load timing down to 15-minute windows. I troubleshot ELD malfunctions and HOS violations and carrier compliance issues on a daily basis. I am a systems person. I believe in data. I believe in documentation. I believe that when something appears to not make sense, there is a sensible explanation that you haven't found yet. I believe all of that, and I still cannot explain what happened with the check-ins. The driver, I'll call him Gary, ran refrigerated loads for us out of Louisville. Produce, dairy, pharmaceutical cold chain, whatever the contract called for. He was one of my most reliable guys. 9 years I ran that dispatch desk and Gary was the driver I worried about least, which in my job is the highest compliment I can pay a person. He called in on time every time. His logs were clean. His temperature records were clean. He knew I-65 through Kentucky the way most people know their own street. Bowling Green, Elizabethtown, Munfordville, Horse Cave. He'd been through every mile of that corridor probably 500 times. He went missing on a Thursday in February. He was running a pharmaceutical load south from Louisville toward Nashville. Standard overnight run. Should have been wheels down at the distribution center in Antioch by 6 a.m. Friday. He checked in with me at 10:47 p.m. from the Pilot Travel Center at the Horse Cave exit. Mile marker 58 on I-65. Got fuel, grabbed food. Said he'd check in again from Bowling Green in about 40 minutes. Normal call. He sounded exactly like he always sounded, a little tired, a little businesslike, the way you get when the road is routine enough that you're mostly just executing. He never called from Bowling Green. I started trying to reach him at 11:45 p.m. when the check-in didn't come. His cell went to voicemail. I tried the cab radio frequency. Nothing. I pulled up his ELD feed on my screen, the electronic logging device that every commercial truck is legally required to run. the system that records location, speed, engine hours, duty status, every piece of operational data in real time. The feed showed him moving south on I-65 at 64 miles per hour, approximately 8 miles past the Horse Cave exit. And then the feed showed nothing. The device went offline at 11:52 p.m. Position: a rural stretch of I-65 between Horse Cave and Munfordville. No exit, no rest area, no truck stop. Just highway. I contacted Kentucky State Police at 12:30 a.m. when his cell remained unreachable and the ELD stayed dark. They began searching the corridor. By dawn, they had units covering every mile of I-65 between Horse Cave and the Tennessee border. No truck, no driver, no evidence of an accident, a breakdown, a pull-off, anything. The pharmaceutical load, temperature-sensitive cargo worth somewhere around $180,000. Gone with him. That alone was the kind of disappearance that keeps a dispatcher awake. That alone was enough. But that's not the story. The story starts the next morning when I came into the office, opened my dispatch system, and found a check-in notification from Gary's ELD, logged at 6:14 a.m., Friday morning, 8 hours after the device went dark. I stared at that notification for probably 30 seconds before I moved. It showed Gary's unit back online, transmitting from a location on I-65 southbound near Bowling Green, moving at 61 miles per hour. I called Kentucky State Police immediately. They redirected units to that corridor. They found nothing. No truck matching Gary's description anywhere near that location. By the time units got there, the ELD signal had gone dark again. I called our fleet management software provider within the hour. I told them what happened and asked them to pull the raw transmission logs, not just what my interface was showing me, but the actual data packets coming from the device. Their technical team spent 2 hours on it and came back to me with an answer that was not an answer. The transmissions were legitimate. The data packets were correctly formatted, correctly authenticated, originating from Gary's specific device ID. They were not spoofed, not duplicated from earlier cache data, not a software glitch on my end. Whatever was generating those signals, it was Gary's actual ELD unit, physically operating and transmitting. For 5 days, that device checked in. Not continuously, it would go dark for hours, sometimes most of a day, and then reappear. Always on I-65. Always somewhere in the Kentucky corridor between Horse Cave and the Tennessee line. Always moving at highway speed. Always showing normal engine operation. Always logging duty status as on-duty driving. The locations shifted. Sometimes it appeared near Munfordville. Once near Glasgow. Once it showed up briefly on the Western Kentucky Parkway, which wasn't even Gary's route. The Kentucky State Police tracked every ping in real time and found nothing at every location. Our software provider had their senior technical team on it by day 3 and could not produce an explanation. The device was transmitting. The truck was not there. On the 5th day, the signal stopped. It hasn't appeared since. The truck has never been found. Gary has never been found. The pharmaceutical load has never been found. The ELD unit, which should be physically attached to the truck's engine control module and cannot normally function without that connection, has never been located or explained. I left that job 4 months after Gary disappeared. I want to be honest about why. I couldn't sit at that dispatch desk anymore. Not because of grief, though there was grief, but because every time I opened the ELD monitoring system, I was waiting for his device to come back online, and I could not do my job properly while part of my brain was waiting for that. It wasn't healthy. It wasn't professional. I made the right call leaving. Now here is the part that I've told almost nobody. The part that moved this from a thing I couldn't explain professionally into something I think about in a different register entirely. Gary had a daughter, early 20s, lived in Elizabethtown. After he disappeared, she went through his apartment. He'd been separated from her mother for years, lived alone, looking for anything that might help investigators. She found a spiral notebook in his kitchen drawer. He used it for personal notes, grocery lists, phone numbers, the kind of miscellaneous paper record that most people keep somewhere. She went through it page by page. Near the back, in his handwriting, was a note, a date and 3 lines of writing. The date was the Friday after he vanished, the day after he was reported missing. The day the first false ELD check-in appeared. She photographed it and sent it to the investigating detective and also, eventually, to me. I don't know why she sent it to me. Maybe because I'd called her to express condolences and she felt I was someone who would take it seriously. She was right about that. The note said, I-65 South. Something's wrong with the load. Don't stop between exits. That's all. No other context. No explanation of what was wrong with the load or what he meant by don't stop between exits. Just those 3 lines in his handwriting, on a date when he had already been missing for 24 hours. The detective had a handwriting analyst look at it. Confirmed as consistent with Gary's writing throughout the rest of the notebook. No signs of coercion in the lettering, no unusual pressure, no tremor, nothing that suggested distress in the physical act of writing. Just his normal handwriting on an impossible date, saying something that made just enough sense to be worse than nonsense. I have spent a considerable amount of time trying to build a logical framework for all of this. Pre-written note with a date added later possible, but the ink aging was consistent throughout according to the analyst. Someone else writing in his style, the analyst gave that low probability. A note he wrote before the trip that happened to correlate with his route, except the date is explicit and in his hand and it's the date after he vanished. I have no framework that holds all of it at once. The ELD transmissions and the note and the absence of any physical evidence across 5 days of active law enforcement searching. I cannot build a model where all of those things coexist and make sense. I've tried. I keep trying. I'm a systems person. I believe in sensible explanations. I believe that when something appears to not make sense, there is a sensible explanation you haven't found yet. I keep finding the edge of that belief and I keep not being able to see past it. Gary's case is classified as a missing persons investigation with possible foul play, which is the official language for we don't know what happened and we're not closing it, but we're not actively working it either. His daughter calls the investigating detective every few months. She told me last year that she stopped expecting answers and started just wanting the calls to mean something. I understood that more than I told her. I work for a different carrier now. Dry freight, shorter routes, nothing refrigerated. I monitor ELD feeds all day, every day. It's still just data to me. It's still just systems and documentation and things I can explain. Mostly. But every February, when the anniversary comes around, I find myself checking the old carrier system. I still have a legacy login that technically I shouldn't, pulling up the device monitoring screen, and looking for Gary's unit ID in the active transmissions. It's never there. I don't know if that's a relief or not. I've thought about telling this story for a long time. Not because I think it'll change anything or because I expect anyone to find an answer that 2 years of looking hasn't produced. I think I just need somewhere to put it, because carrying it alone gets heavy in a way I didn't expect when I was 23 years old working the overnight shift at a truck stop in Iowa. I work at the Pilot Travel Center on US 30 just east of Ames. Night shift, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. I've been doing it since I was 19, which I know sounds like the kind of job you take temporarily and then life just keeps you in, and honestly that's exactly what happened. The hours suit me. I'm a night person. The overnight crowd at a truck stop is its own world. Quieter than you'd think, more polite than people expect, a lot of men and women who are tired in a specific way that road miles produce, who just want coffee and something to eat and to be treated like a regular human being for 5 minutes before they get back in a cab. I like that crowd. I always have. He came in at 2:47 a.m. on a Thursday in April. I remember the time because I just finished restocking the cooler section and I looked up at the clock when the door chimed. Older guy, I'd put him at maybe 60, 62. Big through the shoulders, the kind of build that used to be strong and was still solid. White hair cut short. He was wearing a gray Carhartt jacket that had seen better days and work boots that had seen even worse ones. He walked the way long-haul drivers walk after a full day behind the wheel. A little stiff, a little deliberate, like his body was reminding him it had been sitting in one position for too many hours. He went to the coffee station first. I watched him out of habit. You watch people on overnight, not in a suspicious way, just because there's not much else to watch and it's part of the job to be aware of who's in the store. He took his time with the coffee, poured it black, no cream, no sugar, replaced the lid carefully. Then he walked the snack aisle once without picking anything up. Then he came to the register. He put the coffee on the counter and then he looked at the scratch ticket display behind me. The one we keep at eye level for exactly this reason. He said, "Go ahead and give me one of those $5 ones. The crossword." I pulled one down and rang it up. He paid cash. A 20, waited for his change, folded it into his jacket pocket without counting it. The kind of casual trust that tells you a person is comfortable with small transactions. He took the scratch ticket and a quarter from the little dish we keep on the counter for that purpose, and he scratched it right there, leaning on the counter with one elbow. He didn't win. $2 on the last row, not enough to cash out. He looked at it for a second with the expression people get. Not disappointed exactly, more like confirming what they already expected, and then he smiled. Small smile, more to himself than to me. He said, "Story of my life." And he put the ticket in his jacket pocket. I said something like, "Better luck next time." He said, "Yeah, maybe." He picked up his coffee and he said, "You have a good rest of your night." And I said, "You drive safe." And he walked out the door. That was it. 45 seconds, maybe a minute. The entire interaction was completely ordinary in every way. I don't know why I remember it so clearly. I've tried to figure that out and I can't. I serve 3 for 100 people a week on that shift. I don't remember most of them past the end of the transaction. But him I remember. The gray jacket and the scratch ticket and the small smile when he lost. The way he said, "Story of my life." Something about it just stayed. 11 miles west on US 30, at 3:22 a.m., a westbound trucker called 911 to report a truck pulled over on the shoulder with its hazard lights on. The caller said it had been sitting there for about 20 minutes as he passed, and there was no indication of a breakdown. No flat visible, no smoke, nothing. He said it just looked parked. Story County Sheriff's deputies responded. They found a blue Freightliner Cascadia. Clean pull onto the shoulder. Hazard lights running. Cab dark. They approached the driver's side door and knocked. No response. They tried the handle. Unlocked. Inside the cab, his phone sitting in the dash mount. His wallet in the cup holder. His keys in the ignition turned to accessory power, which is why the hazards were running. His coffee from my register was in the second cup holder, lid still on. It was still warm when the deputies touched it. On the dash, held under the corner of his phone so it wouldn't slide, was the scratch ticket. The crossword one, $5, the one he'd lost on at my counter 35 minutes earlier. He was gone. The deputies searched the shoulder and the adjacent area with flashlights. US 30 at that location runs through flat agricultural land, corn and soybean fields, mostly with drainage ditches running alongside. Wide open. Nowhere to go that you couldn't be seen going. No evidence he'd gone into the ditch, no footprints in the soft ground at the shoulder edge. Nothing. He was simply not in the truck, and there was no visible indication of where he had gone or why. A deputy ran his plates and got his name and his company's dispatch number. His company had him scheduled for a delivery in Denison the next morning. He hadn't missed any check-ins. The stop at my pilot had been a routine fuel and rest break, logged properly, and his next required check-in wasn't until 6 a.m. Nobody had known anything was wrong until that 911 call. His family was contacted. His daughter drove up from Des Moines. I know this because a Story County detective came to talk to me 2 days later, after they'd pulled our security footage and identified me as the last person to have a documented interaction with him. I told them everything I just told you. The detective showed me a photograph to confirm it was the same man I'd served. It was. The detective asked me if he'd seemed distressed. I said no. He asked if he'd said anything unusual. I said no. He asked if anyone else had been in the store at the same time who seemed to be paying attention to him. I thought about it carefully because I wanted to be useful. There had been 2 other people in the store. A young woman buying energy drinks who left before he came to the register, and a man in a booth eating a sandwich who I was pretty sure was a local because I'd seen him before, not a driver. Neither of them had seemed to pay any attention to the man in the gray jacket. I asked the detective if they'd found anything in the fields along that stretch of road. He said they'd done a thorough search. He said they'd brought in a K9 unit. He said the dog had tracked a scent from the truck to the shoulder edge and then lost it, which the handler had said was unusual on open ground like that, the kind of terrain where scent normally carries well. He said they hadn't found anything. I've thought about that scratch ticket more than anything else. Not because it's the strangest detail, the warm coffee and the missing keys are stranger in certain ways, but because of how personal it is. He'd held it in his hand. He'd lost on it and made a small joke and put it in his pocket. And then whatever happened in those 35 minutes between my counter and mile marker wherever it was, he'd taken it out of his pocket and left it on the dash under his phone, like he was saving it or like he wanted someone to find it, or like he'd set it down without thinking because his mind was somewhere else entirely. The story of my life, he'd said. I've turned that phrase over and over. At 2:47 a.m. in a pilot travel center in Iowa, to a cashier he'd never met and would never see again, making a small joke about a scratch ticket. You say things like that 100 times in your life without meaning anything by them. You say them and you walk out the door and you get back in your truck and you keep driving. Except he didn't keep driving. He stopped 11 miles down the road and he left his phone and his wallet and his keys and his coffee and the scratch ticket on the dash, and he went somewhere that a sheriff's department and a K-9 unit and his family and whatever's left of an open missing persons case has never been able to follow. I still work the same shift at the same pilot. Different register now, they renovated the front end last year. But same hours, same counter, same scratch ticket display behind me. Drivers come in at 3 a.m. and buy coffee and lose on scratch tickets and say, "Story of my life," and walk out the door and I watch them go. Every single time, I watch them all the way to their trucks now. I watch until I see the headlights come on. I watch until they pull back out onto US 30. I watch until I can't see them anymore. It's the least I can do. I know it's not enough. I know it doesn't change anything. But it's what I have, and I do it every night, and I think I'll keep doing it for a long time. In 20 years with the Montana Highway Patrol, I filed a lot of reports. Accident reports, fatality reports, vehicle pursuit reports, reports on things I saw on the side of the road at 4 a.m. that I'd rather not have seen. You develop a relationship with paperwork in this job that civilians don't fully appreciate. The report is how you make sense of what happened. You take the chaos of an event, the weather, the darkness, the adrenaline, the human wreckage, and you reduce it to structured language and you file it, and the filing is a kind of closure. Not emotional closure necessarily, but procedural closure. The event has been documented. It exists in the record. You can move on to the next thing. I have one report I filed that I have never been able to move on from. And the reason I can't move on from it is not the emotional weight of it, though there is emotional weight. The reason is that the report contains a physical description of a scene that should not be possible, and I wrote it in my own hand, and I stand behind every word of it, and I still cannot explain it. I'll give you the background first. It was the second week of January. A timber hauler, I'll call him Bud, which is close enough to what people actually called him, was running a loaded log haul on US 2 westbound through the High Line, the stretch of Highway 2 that runs across northern Montana near the Canadian border. That region in January is not forgiving. The High Line is flat, exposed prairie, and when a winter storm comes in off the Canadian plains, it comes in without any terrain to slow it down. The wind gets involved in ways that people who haven't driven that corridor don't fully understand. Visibility can drop to near zero in under 10 minutes. There was a documented storm that night. National Weather Service had issued a winter storm warning for Hill County and surrounding areas. Winds gusting to 45 miles per hour, blowing snow, temperatures dropping to -14 with wind chill. Not unusual for that region in January. Not pleasant, but not unusual. Experienced drivers who know the High Line run it in those conditions all the time. You slow down, you watch the road, you know where the pull-offs are, you keep your fuel up. Bud knew that road. He'd been hauling timber in northern Montana for over 20 years. He wasn't a man who made careless decisions about winter driving. His company had his last GPS ping at 11:38 p.m. on US 2 approximately 6 miles east of Havre. After that, the signal dropped. Not unusual in a storm of that intensity. Cellular and GPS coverage on the High Line is inconsistent in good weather and worse in bad. His company flagged him as overdue at 3 a.m. when he hadn't reached the mill outside of Shelby. They contacted Hill County Sheriff's Office, who contacted us. We put units on US 2 at first light. The storm had mostly passed by then, leaving behind about 14 inches of new snow and a wind that was still running at 25 miles per hour. Visibility was workable. We ran the corridor east from Havre looking for a truck in a ditch, a breakdown, anything. A rancher found him first, or found the truck, rather. The rancher was checking his fence line on a Forest Service access road that branches north off US 2 about 4 miles east of Havre. The access road cuts into federal grazing land and dead ends at a cattle gate about a mile and a half in. He was on a snowmobile at around 8 a.m. when he spotted the truck. He called it in, and I was one of 2 MHP officers who responded. I want to describe what we found as precisely as I can because precision is the only thing I have to offer here. The truck was sitting on the Forest Service access road, approximately 0.3 miles from the US 2 turnoff. Fully loaded log haul, the timber still chained and intact on the trailer. The truck was parked straight on the road, centered between the shallow ditches on either side, positioned as deliberately as if someone had taken care to park it properly. Engine off. Lights off. No damage. Not in a ditch, not stuck in the snow, not showing any sign of mechanical distress. The snow around the truck was undisturbed. I'm going to say that again with the emphasis it deserves. 14 inches of fresh snow had fallen during the storm. The snow around that truck, on all sides in every direction, was smooth and unbroken. No footprints leading away from the driver's door. No footprints leading to it. No disturbance of any kind in the snow surrounding the vehicle, as far as we could see in every direction. The snow on the truck itself told a specific story. The hood had accumulation consistent with the truck having been stationary for most or all of the storm, roughly 8 to 10 hours of snowfall's worth of buildup. The tire tracks leading from US 2 to the truck's position were partially filled with blown snow but still visible, consistent with the truck having driven in early in the storm and the tracks having had several hours to fill. So the truck had driven in, parked, and sat there through the entire storm. But there were no tracks of any kind leading away from the truck after it parked. Whatever snow had fallen after the truck stopped had covered everything equally. The surface around that truck was as smooth and untouched as a field that nothing had crossed all winter. I have thought about every explanation. He got out before the heavy snow started and the storm covered his tracks. Except the storm was already active when his GPS went dark, and 14 inches of accumulation with 45 miles per hour winds would need many hours to completely erase deep boot prints in open ground. He was airlifted somehow. I am writing this down only to acknowledge that I considered and rejected every possibility, including absurd ones. He never got out of the truck and is somehow not in the truck. I searched that cab myself twice. He is not in the truck. The cab was empty. The sleeper was empty. The space behind the seats was empty. The cab itself. I need to tell you about the cab. Driver's door was unlocked. We opened it carefully. Inside, his logbook, open to that day's entry, pen clipped to the page. His thermos, empty. His company phone in the dash mount, battery dead from the cold. His personal wallet in the center console. His heavy winter coat, a Carhartt insulated parka, the kind rated for extreme cold, folded on the passenger seat. He was dressed for a cab, not for -14 and 45 miles per hour wind. Whatever he left that truck wearing, it wasn't what a man planning to walk any distance in a Montana blizzard would wear. We searched. I want to be clear about the scale of the search because I don't want you to think we didn't try. Hill County Search and Rescue, MHP, Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks officers who knew that federal land volunteers. We had snowmobiles covering a grid. We had a helicopter as soon as the wind dropped enough to fly, which was the afternoon of the next day. We searched that access road and the surrounding federal land in a 2-mile radius for 4 days. We found nothing.
No VUD.
No tracks.
No clothing.
No sign that a human being had moved through that snow in any direction from that truck. The case went to Hill County Sheriff as a missing persons investigation. I wrote my report. I described the scene exactly as I found it, and I used precise language, and I did not speculate in the official documentation, because that's not what reports are for. The report states what was observed. The report does not explain what was observed. I retired from MHP 3 years ago. I live outside of Havre now, which is its own kind of answer to the question of whether the place got under my skin. There's something about this part of Montana that I couldn't leave, even after everything. The High Line does that to people. It's brutal and it's flat and the wind never really stops and the winters are the kind that test what you're made of. And some people leave and some people stay and I stayed. I drive past that Forest Service road turnoff a few times a month. There's no marker there. Nothing to indicate anything happened. Just a dirt track going north into federal land. A cattle gate you can see from the highway if you know to look for it. Every time I pass it in winter, I look at the snow. It's a reflex now, automatic. I look at the surface of the snow around that turnoff and I think about that morning in January and the 14 inches of undisturbed accumulation surrounding a truck that had clearly been driven there by someone who then ceased to exist in any physical sense that I could find or document or explain. I think about his coat folded on the passenger seat. Neat, like someone who expected to come back for it. In 20 years of highway patrol, I learned to trust physical evidence above everything. Above testimony, above theory, above what any person tells you they saw or didn't see. The physical evidence is the truth. It doesn't lie, it doesn't misremember, it doesn't have an agenda. You read the scene and the scene tells you what happened. That scene told me something I don't have the language for. And I've been a careful man with language my whole career. When I say I don't have the language for it, I mean I have looked at every word available to me and none of them are honest enough to hold what I saw on that access road on that January morning. The snow was undisturbed. That's the truth. That's all I've got. That's enough. The voicemail is 43 seconds long. I have listened to it so many times that I no longer hear it the way you hear something new. I hear it the way you hear a song you've known since childhood. Not note by note, but all at once. The whole shape of it arriving in your chest before the first word plays. I know every pause. I know where his breath shifts. I know the exact moment at around the 30-second mark where something changes in his voice that I can't name but can't stop trying to name. I've had people listen to it, friends, an audio forensics consultant I hired 2 years after he disappeared, a grief counselor who had the patience to sit through it with me 6 times in one session. Nobody can tell me what that change means. Nobody can tell me anything that helps. My dad was 61 years old when he vanished on I-40 through the Texas Panhandle. He'd driven long haul for most of his working life, started in his 20s, retired at 58 when his knees got bad enough that the long sits became genuinely painful. He did 2.5 years of retirement before he went crazy with the stillness of it. That's the word he used, crazy. He wasn't built for staying put. He needed the road the way some people need water. So he got his independent authority, leased a truck, and started taking occasional loads. Nothing grueling. He was careful about it. He'd pick up a haul that interested him, run it, come home, rest up, pick up another one when he felt like it. He called it retirement with field trips. The last field trip was a dry goods load from Amarillo to Flagstaff. I-40 westbound through the Panhandle across New Mexico into Arizona. He'd run that corridor maybe a dozen times in his career and liked it. Said the Texas Panhandle at night was one of the few places left in America where you could see the stars the way they were meant to be seen, without any light pollution eating the edges. He left Amarillo around 3 a.m. on a Tuesday in September, which was his preferred departure time. Cool air, low traffic, good running. He called me at 4:47 a.m. I was asleep. I didn't hear my phone. That's the thing I've had to make my peace with. That he called and I didn't answer, and what reached me instead was 43 seconds of voicemail that I woke up to at 7 a.m. with no understanding yet of what it meant. I'm going to tell you what the voicemail says. Exactly. He says, "Hey, it's me. Just checking in, you were probably asleep. I'm out past Vega. I don't know, something's different tonight out here. The sky looks strange. Not bad strange, just, I don't know. Listen, I'm going to stop at the Crossroads 40 for a bit, grab some coffee, rest my eyes for 20 minutes. Should still make Tucumcari by sunrise. Anyway, love you. Tell your sister I said hey." Then the line ends. 3 things in that voicemail have consumed years of my life. The first is the sky. I've asked everyone I can find who was on I-40 through the Texas Panhandle that Tuesday morning whether the sky looked unusual. Most people don't remember. One driver I tracked down through a trucking forum said he recalled the cloud formation being strange around that time. Low-lying, he said, almost greenish, which can indicate certain weather conditions, but the meteorological records for that morning show nothing remarkable. No storm, no front. Nothing that would explain a visually anomalous sky at 4:47 a.m. The weather station in Vega, Texas recorded clear conditions. The sky was clear. Whatever my dad saw, I have no confirmation and no explanation. The second thing is the truck stop name, the Crossroads 40. I spent the better part of a month trying to find a truck stop by that name on that stretch of I-40. I contacted every database I could access: FMCSA fuel stop records, Trucker Path, Google Maps historical data, the Texas DOT Commercial Vehicle Services Directory. There is no Crossroads 40 on I-40 in the Texas Panhandle. There is no record of a business by that name having ever operated on that corridor. The truck stops on that stretch, and there aren't many between Amarillo and the New Mexico border, are known quantities. He didn't misspeak the name of an existing stop. The name, he said, does not correspond to any real location on his route. The third thing is the change in his voice at the 30-second mark. Right before he says he's going to stop, there's a pause, about 2 seconds, and when he continues, his voice is the same in content, the same words you'd expect, but something underneath it is different, quieter in a way that isn't volume, like something had just shifted in his attention or his awareness, like part of him had gone somewhere while the rest of him kept talking. I cannot prove this. I cannot measure it. I cannot get any technical analysis to confirm what I'm hearing. But I've listened to that voicemail more than 1,000 times, and I know what my father's voice sounds like in every register. Happy, tired, worried, distracted, and what I hear at second 30 is none of those things. It is something I don't have a category for. His truck was found 2 days later, 214 miles off his planned route, near the Oklahoma border, on a county road outside of Canadian, Texas. A small town in Hemphill County that sits northeast of Amarillo, nowhere near I-40. His truck was on a Caliche County road facing east. He had been heading west. The truck was parked and empty, engine off, legally loaded with the Flagstaff cargo still intact and undisturbed. His phone was on the passenger seat, battery at 3%. The voicemail to me was the last outgoing call. His logbook was open on the dash, entry current up to about 4 a.m., which is consistent with the timeline. His reading glasses were on the dash. He needed them for maps and paperwork. He never drove without them in reach. His boots were on the floor of the cab. I keep coming back to the boots because this is the second time I've heard this detail in connection with a vanished trucker. A man I know through an online community of families of missing drivers told me his missing brother also left his boots behind, and I don't know what to do with that pattern except to hold it and let it sit there being unexplained. Hemphill County Sheriff's Office investigated. Texas Rangers assisted. There's a missing persons case filed. The 200-mile deviation from his route has never been explained. His GPS unit showed a fragmented data trail that investigators described as inconsistent, with location pings that suggested movement patterns that didn't correspond to any logical travel path between where he was on I-40 and where the truck was found. One investigator, a ranger I spoke with personally, said the data looked like the device had been malfunctioning, which was possible for a unit of that age. He said it in a way that was careful and professional, and that I could tell even then was not the full weight of what he thought. I have a folder on my laptop. It contains the voicemail file, the GPS data fragments, the investigative reports I was given access to, photographs of the scene where the truck was found, a scan of his logbook pages, and a document I've been adding to for 4 years that I call The Attempt. The attempt to make sense of it. Every theory I've built and the evidence that supports it and the evidence that breaks it. I filled over 60 pages. I've broken every theory I've built. My sister doesn't look at the folder. She made her peace in a different direction. She decided he's gone and she grieves him as gone, and she is, I think, healthier for it. She has told me gently and then less gently that the folder is hurting me, and she's probably right. I know she's probably right, but here is what I can't get past. Here is the thing that keeps me in the folder at midnight when I should be sleeping. He called to tell me he loved me. At 4:47 in the morning, somewhere past Vega, Texas, on a clear night where the sky looked strange, before he stopped at a truck stop that doesn't exist. He could have just kept driving. He didn't need to call. He called because I don't know why he called. Maybe he felt something and wanted a voice. Maybe it was pure routine habit. Maybe it was something else. Some instinct that I'm not willing to put words to because the words I'd use are too large and too final. He left me 43 seconds. He said love you. He said tell your sister. He said hey. I haven't deleted it. I'm not going to delete it. My phone carrier has told me that voicemails are not stored server-side indefinitely, that eventually the infrastructure changes and old files become inaccessible, and I should download it if I want to keep it. I have downloaded it to 3 separate hard drives and a cloud backup. I have sent it to my sister and to my dad's brother and to a friend I trust completely. It will not be lost. I made sure of that. Whatever else I've failed to do in 4 years of trying to find my father, I made sure his voice won't be lost. 43 seconds. The sky looks strange. Love you. That's what I have. That's what I work with. That's what I'll carry for the rest of my life down whatever road is left in front of me. Listening for an answer that I don't know the shape of yet. From a man who drove west into a clear Texas night and came to rest 200 miles away facing east. As if something had turned him around and pointed him home and then taken him anyway. Nobody connected the dots because nobody was looking at the whole picture. That's the thing I need you to understand before anything else. Each disappearance got filed in a different county, in a different state, under a different jurisdiction. One went to San Juan County in New Mexico. One went to San Juan County in Utah, different state, same county name, different filing system, different database. One went to the Navajo Nation Tribal Police. One went to the Colorado Bureau of Investigation. 31 separate files, 31 separate case numbers, spread across 4 states and multiple sovereign jurisdictions over 35 years. Nobody's job was to look at all of them at once. So nobody did. I'm not law enforcement. I want to be clear about that. I'm a former investigative journalist who spent 12 years covering the Southwest for regional outlets and then went independent. I started pulling on this thread in 2019 because a woman contacted me whose husband had vanished on US 491 in 2017, and she felt like the investigation had been minimal and she wanted someone to listen. I listened, and then I started making calls. And then I couldn't stop making calls because every call produced another name, another file, another family that had been sitting with an open case and an empty chair and the specific loneliness of a mystery that the official world had quietly decided wasn't worth the resources to solve. 31 truck drivers, 74 miles of highway, 35 years. That is not a coincidence. That is a pattern. And the fact that no federal agency has ever formally acknowledged it as a pattern is either the most stunning institutional failure I've encountered in 20 years of this work, or it is something deliberate, and I have spent 5 years trying to determine which one it is. US 491 runs through the Four Corners region, the place where New Mexico, Utah, Colorado, and Arizona meet at a single point. The stretch I'm talking about runs roughly from Gallup in the north to just below Shiprock, cutting through high desert plateau country that most Americans have never seen and couldn't locate on a map. Red rock, scrub juniper, canyon country that drops away from the road without warning. The Navajo Nation on both sides for much of the corridor. Elevation changes that hit your engine and your ears simultaneously. It is one of the most geographically dramatic and logistically remote stretches of highway in the continental United States. It was called US 666 until 2003, when the federal government renumbered it, officially because the 3-digit designation was needed for a different corridor, unofficially because the highway had developed a reputation dark enough that the number had become a liability. Locals called it the Devil's Highway. Truckers called it other things. The renaming changed nothing about the road. The road doesn't care what number you put on the signs. The earliest disappearance I was able to document with confidence is from 1989. A flatbed driver running construction materials north toward Cortez. His truck was found pulled off the highway near mile marker 47. Empty. Locked. No sign of struggle or breakdown. The Navajo Nation police investigated. The file still exists. The driver was never found. From there, the cases accumulate. 1991. 1994, 2 in 1997, a gap until 2001, then 3 in 4 years. The pace picks up after 2010. Whether because there are actually more disappearances or because documentation improved, I can't say with certainty. What I can say is that across 35 years, on 74 miles of highway, 31 commercial drivers have vanished without sufficient explanation. Not died in accidents, Not broken down and walked to safety and been found. Vanished. Trucks located. Drivers absent. Cases opened. Cases quietly going cold. I want to give you the shape of the pattern because the pattern is the story. These are not random events distributed evenly across the corridor. 17 of the 31 cases cluster in a 22-mile stretch between mile markers 39 and 61. That's not a geographic coincidence. That specific stretch runs through terrain that is deeper into the plateau, further from any town, with the most limited cell coverage on the entire corridor. If you were going to take someone on this road and not be seen doing it, that is where you would do it. That is where the road is most alone. 12 of the 31 cases share a specific detail that I didn't notice until I built a physical timeline on my wall with index cards and string like some kind of obsessive you'd see in a documentary. 12 of them disappeared between 2 and 5 a.m. Not just nighttime, that specific 3-hour window. Commercial drivers run at night all the time, so some nighttime clustering is expected. But 12 out of 31 in the same 3-hour window, on the same 22-mile stretch. I've shown that clustering to 2 statisticians and a retired FBI analyst. All 3 told me the probability of that being random is extremely low. The tribal dimension of this cannot be ignored, and I will not gloss over it. The majority of this corridor runs through or adjacent to Navajo Nation land. The Navajo Nation has its own law enforcement, its own judicial system, its own relationship with federal agencies that is historically complex and frequently under-resourced. Several of these cases fell into jurisdictional gray areas. The truck was on the federal highway, but the surrounding land was tribal, or the driver was last seen at a location that was technically on the nation, but the company that employed him was headquartered in a state with no coordination protocol with tribal authorities. Jurisdictional confusion is not malicious, but it creates gaps. And in those gaps, cases get lost. Families get redirected. Investigations stall. I contacted the FBI field office in Albuquerque in 2021 with a summary document I'd prepared. All 31 cases, timelines, geographic clustering, the 3-hour window pattern. I asked whether the Bureau had any interest in treating this as a coordinated series of incidents rather than isolated missing persons cases. I was told that missing persons cases on state and tribal land fall under the jurisdiction of state and tribal authorities, and that the FBI would assist if formally requested by those authorities. I was not told that my summary was wrong or that my pattern was coincidental. I was told, in careful federal language, that it was not their file to open. The Navajo Nation Department of Public Safety, to their credit, was more engaged. A supervisor I spoke with, I'll call him Bernard, told me that the corridor has a known reputation within tribal law enforcement going back decades. He used careful language too, but underneath the careful language was a man who had heard enough from enough people over enough years to take the geography seriously. He told me there had been internal discussions about the clustering. He told me resources had been the limiting factor on any coordinated response. He told me he hoped my work would produce enough visibility to change that calculation. I asked Bernard directly, "What do you think is happening out there?" He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Some of it is human. Some of it," he paused again, "some of it the land has always kept." I've thought about that answer for 3 years. I've tried to decide whether it's the statement of a man gesturing at something real that he can't prove, or the statement of a man who lives inside a cultural framework that holds space for explanations that my framework doesn't. I've decided it might be both. I've decided those aren't mutually exclusive. What I know for certain, 31 drivers are gone. Their families are largely unknown to each other, scattered across the country, connected to the road only by the loved ones it took. I've spoken to 19 of those families. 19 different stories about 19 different people who drove onto that 74-mile stretch and didn't come out the other side. A daughter in Phoenix who keeps her father's CB radio on her bookshelf. A widow in Farmington who still calls the county sheriff's office on the anniversary. A son in Denver who told me he drives US 491 every year on the date his uncle disappeared. Slowly, windows down, like he's looking for something in the air. Nobody has ever formally connected these cases. Nobody has ever stood in front of a camera or a courthouse or a congressional hearing and said, "This stretch of highway has taken 31 drivers and we do not know why, and we are treating it as the coordinated, systematic, documented crisis that it is." I am saying it now. I'm saying it as clearly and as loudly as I know how. 31 drivers. 74 miles. 35 years. The highway is still open. Trucks still run it every night. The mile markers still count up through that 22-mile stretch where 17 people vanished into high desert air and left their rigs behind like shed skin. And somewhere in a county filing system in New Mexico or Utah or Colorado, there is a case number that belongs to the 32nd driver. It just hasn't been opened yet. That's not speculation. That's arithmetic. And arithmetic, unlike jurisdictional boundaries, doesn't care whose file it lands in. The road keeps running. The pattern keeps building. And the silence from every agency that should be paying attention keeps telling you everything you need to know about who this highway is allowed to take without consequence. 31. Count them. Say their names. Don't let the number stop there. These roads have taken people that no report fully accounts for, no investigation truly closed, and no family ever stopped searching for. Every story you just heard is a door that never got a proper answer. If this kind of truth keeps you up at night the way it keeps us up, subscribe to Unheard Fears. We'll keep pulling on the threads that everyone else lets go. The highway doesn't forget, and neither do we.